Knit It. My name is Sandy and today we're going to take some yarn and knit a cute scarf. You should have already picked up your take and make bag, which will include 2 skeins of yarn. And the other thing that you might need for this project is a pair of scissors. Let's knit it. All right, we're going to start our scarf by making a slip knot. And to do that, we're going to take both skeins of yarn and you're going to find a free end in the yarn and you're going to match them up on the end, and you want about 1.5 yards to make our stitches to begin. A good way to measure the 1.5 yards is to take your arm and pull the yarn and measure twice, and that should give you enough yarn to cast on your stitches. Now to make our slip knot, we're going to take the yarn, and the yarn that's still in the skeins is called the working yarn, and our free yarn is called the tail. So we're going to take the yarn and we're going to make a loop like this, just kind of fold it in half, and then you're going to take your hand and you're going to kind of almost twist the yarn, and you're going to pull yarn from your working yarn through this little loop that we've made, and we'll just hold both, or kind of hold both ends and pull it so you've got a loop. And you should be able to adjust the size if you've not pulled it too tight. And that is our slip knot, and that's our first step in working on our scarf. Okay, now that you've got your slip knot, you make sure it's on your right hand and adjust the knot. The looser your knot, the looser the weave in your scarf is going to be. And you don't want it too tight because you want to be able to move it up your arm as you add stitches to your arm. So to make this next stitch, you want to make sure your working yarn is in front of you and your tail is behind you. And so we're going to make a loop, and we're going to take our tail and we're going to bring it up this way a little bit, and we're going to twist it counterclockwise, and you almost want like a 1.5 turns in there, and you're going to take it and hold it in your right hand, and then with your left hand you're going to go through and you're going to pull yarn from your working yarn, and then you'll drop the loop from your right hand, put the new loop over your right hand, and then tighten your stitch. And like this, tighten it up so it's about the same tightness as the one before, and then just continue with the next stitch, making sure your working yarn is in front of you, your tail behind you, and you'll grab more yarn, twist it about 1.25 turns, grab it with your right hand, put your left through, grab your working yarn, drop your right hand, put this loop over, and then tighten with the tail. And continue with that until you have a total of 10 stitches on your arm. Now that we have 10 stitches cast onto our arm, we're going to actually start working on our scarf. And one thing to remember is if you do a stitch and it doesn't feel right, it's okay to take that stitch off your hand, let the yarn loose, and redo the stitch. That's the beauty of this kind of craft. And so to move on to actually the body of our scarf, we don't have to worry about our tail anymore. We're done with that part for now. We're going to take our working yarn, we're going to wrap it around our thumb from underneath. And once you get that wrapped, hold it with your fingers. And then take your stitch, pull it over your hand, and then you drop that stitch. And then we're going to take the stitch from your thumb and we're going to turn it a half turn and we're going to put it over our left hand. And if you feel like you need to, you can tighten it a little bit. Pull your yarn up and then just keep repeating that stitch, moving from completing everything from your right arm over to your left. And you want to work 20 rows. If you want a little longer, you can do that, but we're going to do 20 for this project. So we just continue wrapping our yarn from underneath around our left, from our right hand, pulling the stitch over our fist, and then dropping it, taking this loop, turning it a half, and putting it on our arm and tightening it up as we go. And there's going to be little loops in your scarf. That's because of the size of our knitting needles or our arms, which is what we're using in place of knitting needles. So you'll just continue that until you've reached your 20 rows. And just, we're going to continue doing this to each one of the 10 stitches. And once we've got that done, that gives us a complete row, and we're going to want to do 20 rows for this scarf. All right, and you want to wrap underneath. Grasp with your fist, pull it over, half a turn, move it onto your left arm, wrap underneath, pull it over, do the turn, and that gives us a completed row. That's doing that activity to each one of the stitches. There. All right, now that we're done with our 20 rows, this is what our scarf should look like. It's going to be pretty long, and there's going to be a pretty pattern to all your stitches. And also you want to remember to have your work on your left arm to start the next step. For our next step, now that we have our 20 rows completed, we're doing what is called binding off. And for that, we're going to continue the process like we were working before, where we're going to wrap our yarn around our thumb, drop the stitch, move it to our right hand, and then tighten it up if need be. And we're going to do that twice for 2 stitches on your right arm. And then once you have your 2 stitches on your arm like you like them, you want to keep hold of your working yarn, and then you're going to take the first stitch that you knit on your arm and you're going to pull it over and just drop it. Then you're going to go back to your left hand, knit a stitch, get it on your right hand, and then again with 2 stitches on your right hand, you're going to take this first stitch and pull it over your hand. And you're going to continue that until you have all of these stitches off of your hands. So just, you want to make sure that you always have 2 stitches on your right hand when you pull the one over. And if you have to adjust your working yarn, that's okay. And just try to keep it at the same tightness. Just continue working. Nothing new about the stitches we're doing. Just wrap. Oops. Make sure you've got your tightness. Pull this one off. Make our stitch on our left hand. All right. One more stitch and we have our project off of our arms. Okay. All right, now you will have one stitch left. All right, when we get down to one last stitch left on your arm, you're going to go ahead and take that off your arm and kind of gently lay your project down. And then we're going to cut enough yarn so that we can finish the project. So just pull a whole bunch of yarn off your skeins of yarn. Take some scissors and cut your yarn. And then we're going to take this yarn and we're going to pull it through our loop. So hopefully you've got enough room there to squeeze that through. And then we're going to tighten this loop so that we can move on to our next step. But just pull it so it's tight like that. Now that we've got all of our knitting done, we've got two options here. We can just leave our scarf as it is and use it to be a beautiful scarf you wrap around your neck, or we can close up the ends and make a cowl. And right now I'm going to show you how to do the cowl. So with our yarn off of our arms and how we had just finished it, we're going to take the length of the scarf and we're going to fold it in half like that. And once we've got that, we're going to match up our ends, and you may have to kind of tug to make them even. But we'll take, and you're gonna lift up your scarf and you're gonna see the ends, how they've kind of, the yarn has created a kind of a loose V shape here. And so we actually want to start with it this way. So our working yarn is here. So here's your working yarn and here's your V shape. And just take the ends, match them up, and take the yarn, and the stitches are loose enough, you'll be able to kind of stick your fingers in there to help guide the yarn through. Wrap it over these stitches on the end and pull the length of the yarn that you cut off completely through. And if you cut a bunch, it'll take you a minute to pull it through. And you'll just wrap it over like this, kind of pull it tight, but not too tight. And then find your next stitch, your next V's, if you will, and pull the yarn through again. And you'll just keep doing that pulling it under your ending stitches, wrapping it over, and we'll just continue that until we're at the other end of the scarf. Just work it over, find your next V, and wrap it. Pull your extra yarn through, and just continue like that. And these stitches are loose enough that if you miss one, I'm sure it would be easy to undo it and go back. And even if you miss one, I think the project is a loose enough weave that you'd be okay if you miss one. Or if you end up with two in the same stitch, I think that's probably okay too. You just want to make sure that you get both lengths of your yarn through. And we'll just continue that, working the yarn over and through. And you see how it's coming together, it's holding the scarf. When we get all done, we'll be able to show you how it's turned into a cowl. Right. And if you notice when you're working your seaming here to close the ends that your stitches are too tight, you can just go back and loosen them up a little bit. It's kind of a gauge you'll just have to use, but you can just pull the yarn from this end and loosen it up, and then that'll make your stitches looser and make it look more like the rest of the scarf. All right. Once you have tied off the ends for your cowl and you get all your stitches done, you want to clip your yarn, and then you want to take and run it back through your last seam stitch and just make a knot through that loop so that your stitches won't come undone. And then we'll show you how to weave your ends in so you won't have these little tails hanging off. And what you will do is just take your end, and you can clip it a little shorter if you would like to do that, but you'll just take them and starting close to your knot, just run them through your seams like so. Just kind of lift up a loop, and if you lose an end, that's okay. Just start over and just kind of take and weave them through like this. Just push them through. And because this is an inside seam, you won't see it in your cowl. And if you still have yarn left, once you get back to the other end, you can just take that and clip it off like that. And then you'll take this tail and do the same thing. You're just going to take your loops and lift them up. And run this tail back through the other way. Just keep tucking them under. Right. Oops, and if you get it too tight, just straighten it out. And once you get to the other end, again, if you have too much left, just clip it off. And your project is done. And you just will turn it right side out. And there is your cowl. There you go. All right, if you choose to do the plain scarf instead of the cowl, the last step will be weaving your loose ends of your yarn into your scarf. So all you would do is take your yarn and just tuck it under the stitches. See the V right there? Just kind of stick your finger in there and work it from side to side. And then make sure you pull it all the way through for both lengths of yarn. And again, just tuck it under. And you want to keep it loose to match the rest of your scarf. Just keep tucking under the V's. And work your way. Just keep tucking it in and moving stitch to stitch. And if you get started and you get tangled up, just back your stitch out. And just make sure you're pulling both lengths of yarn through. And just keep going until you get to the end. And again, if you pull it too tight, just kind of straighten it out. And if you get to the end and you have extra yarn, you can clip your yarn here if you choose. Or actually you should clip it and tuck it in, and you're done. And then you would do the same thing with the loose yarn at the other end of your project. Just weave it in and enjoy your scarf. And here is our finished project. Thanks for joining us for You Can Knit It. I hope you had a good time. We would love to see any pictures or videos that you've got of yourself making the project. Feel free to send them along to us at the email address on your screen. Have a great day.